welcome to the sew along for the Ross Panty, one of 3 panty patterns in Madeline's book, Sew Lingerie, and one of 11 lingerie patterns in the book. The Ross Panty is a beginner-friendly sewing project, beginner-friendly lingerie project, as well as beginner-friendly panty project. The Barker and the Millie, which are the 2 other panty patterns in the book, are your basic thong and your basic brief. The Ross, a little bit more stylized. It's French cut, so it's cut higher on the waist as well as the leg line, and it just is a little bit more stylized than the basic brief as well as thong. Before we get into sewing, it's really important to make sure that you have all the pattern pieces cut out correctly, all the fabrics cut out correctly for each pattern piece, as well as the correct trims. So let's go over that really quickly. So you have your right front panty, which is B, and this is made of your cut on your lace, and this is cut on your scallop lace. The scalloped edge is on this edge. And you might be thinking that for the left front panty A, that the scalloped edge goes on this edge. No, I always think that when I go to make it, I'm like, wait, no, it is on this edge. I have to do a double take. It is on this edge. So to repeat that, the scalloped edge for the right front panty and the left front panty is on this edge and then on this edge. This edge is cut with a rotary cutter, so it's just a clean cut. Both of these are lined with stretch mesh. You could have them unlined, just an option, but if you want more, if you don't want it to be as sheer or as see-through, you could just use a layer of stretch mesh. The other pieces, let me go to, so those are the 2 with linings. The other one with a lining is the gusset. Really easy. It's just your main fabric, your lining fabric, spray basted together, and then you have your cotton jersey gusset. The 2 pattern pieces that are not lines are the back panel, C, and the scalloped edges going along the bootay, so this edge. And then you have your, I've cut a hole in it, so I don't actually know what, maybe back insert D, I should know this, but I'm having a brain fart. And that is just 1 layer of stretch mesh. But you could use another layer of lace, whatever you want to use. It's just supposed to be like a little combo contrast cut out on the back. Now the trims that you'll need, the elastics, you'll need a wide elastic band. Even though the book calls for 1 5/8 of a band, you can use 1 inch, you can use 1/2 inch. Some people don't like this wide of a bottom band or of a waistband. Some people love it. So this can be really any width, I would say from 1/2 inch to about 2 inches. Then you have your picot elastic. So this is a decorative picot elastic, so it's a little bit more fancy picot elastic. You also have your regular picot elastic too, which is just like a normal picot loop edge. So either will work. So let's get into sewing. The first step is to sew the center back panels together along the vertical seam, not along this seam. This is a no. This is a yes. Now, if you're new to making lingerie, this might make you a little bit nervous because you're like, wait, whoa, I gotta sew through just a layer of, or 2 layers of lace with no like stabilizer. You can do it. You were going to sew it with, you can sew it, even though the book says you use a certain stitch, you can sew it with a straight stitch or a zigzag stitch, whichever you feel comfortable with. Generally speaking, this is generally, I don't like to say 100% for anything because there's always some case where it's not true. Generally speaking, in DIY lingerie, you can use a straight stitch on vertical seams, but you always want to use a zigzag stitch on horizontal seams. The reason being is that lingerie, swimwear, activewear needs to stretch horizontally, but not necessarily vertically. So you can use a straight stitch or a zigzag stitch. Then if you have a serger, you can serge this edge, or you can just press it to one side and top stitch it with a zigzag stitch. You also want to stop about 1/4 inch from the top edge. That will allow you to sew on the center back insert when we get to that step. back seam is sewn and top stitched. Now let's sew the center back insert. Key thing here is that we're gonna sew it to one side, pin it and sew it to one side, then we're gonna pivot and sew it to the other side. So I'm gonna lay right sides together, which this mesh really doesn't have a right side. Technically it probably does, but they pretty much look the same, so I'm just gonna go with it. You're gonna sew, you're gonna pin from the top edge, and then you're gonna pin right where that center back seam starts. Remember when we didn't sew all the way up, we stopped about a 1/4 inch short? So you're basically going to sew to that point. So I'm gonna sew with a straight stitch, 1/4 inch seam allowance, back stitch at beginning ends. When I get to this point, I'm going to pivot, and then I'm gonna repin the other side to the other side. Panty is assembled. I sewed the center back insert with a straight stitch, pivoted, and then I went back and sewed a top stitch with a zigzag stitch just so that the seam allowances wouldn't show through the mesh panel or the back insert, which is sheer. Let's move on to the front panty. So the first step in sewing the front panty is to attach the gusset to the larger front panel. Left and right gets confusing, especially what's your left, what's my left. So I'm just gonna refer to this one as the large front panty side, this one as a small front panty side. So we are going to put right sides together of the gusset and the larger front panty together. We are going to pin that. Then on the wrong side, we're gonna flip it and we're going to pin the gusset to it. We're gonna sew these two together with a straight stitch. I'm just gonna repin it through all layers. And once we sew all those layers together, you will see that when you flip it, that seam is encased within the seam. The seam allowance is encased within the seam. Once the gusset is sewn, then we are going to attach the smaller front panel to the larger front panel. Before we do that, we have to finish this scalloped edge with elastic. Now, I went ahead and did this up because I think it's easier to see the after rather than trying to explain it to you before. So I laid the elastic on top, and the flat edge of the elastic was aligned with the low point of the scalp. So the low point of the scalp is that lower edge of the scalp. The high point of the scalp is where like the outer edge of the scalp is. Then I just did a wide zigzag. You can do it wider than this, but I just did a really wide zigzag. Now I'm gonna lay this underneath. It gets easier to see if I flip this to the wrong side. Now I'm gonna lay this on top, and then I'm going to lay the elastic on top again and repeat that step. So I'm gonna do a wide zigzag, and this is going to attach both sides together. And this step is going to attach the smaller front panel to the larger front panel. Smaller front panty is attached to larger front panty. Now the whole front panty is assembled. Before we sew the front panty to the back panty, we have to sew the picot elastic on the left and right leg openings. Sewing picot elastic is a technique or a bra making method skill that you'll use throughout the book. So it is demonstrated in a lot of the other sew-alongs, but I'm going to demonstrate it here as well. It is sewn in 2 steps, and I went ahead and I did the first step because I think it's easier to see this step after rather than trying to explain to you before. So you are going to lay your picot elastic down so that the edge of the elastic is aligned with the edge of the fabric. If you want to have it hang over just a hair, that will prevent you from having to trim the seam allowances after, and you are going to sew it with a zigzag stitch really close to that picot edge. You don't want it to be going down the center. You don't want to be on the flat edge. You want it to be really close to that picot edge, because when you go to fold it back for the second pass, you want just the picot edge peeking out. You don't want the whole elastic tape peeking out. So you want to get as close to that picot edge as possible. Then once you sew the first pass, you are going to flip it to the other side and then sew the other pass. This one's going to be really close to the flat edge. Sewed both edges of the front panty with picot elastic. I also went ahead and sewed the front panty to the back panty at the side seam as well as the gusset seam, using a straight stitch, back stitch, beginning the ends. For the side seam, after the waistband is sewn to the panty, the amount of seam allowances that is exposed on the inside is like nothing. So I didn't even finish it. I just pressed it to one side and pinned it in place. For the gusset seam, I pressed it towards the back panty. It naturally wanted to fold that way. And I just did a zigzag stitch. The reason being is that you can do a serge. I know that some people have commented to me that a serge in this area can bother their skin, get itchy and just be like irritating. So just having a raw edge is not going to fray. If you just do a zigzag stitch, will finish it. Okay, so the last step is to sew the waistband to the top of the panty. Now the pattern does come with a pattern piece for the waistband, but I always suggest double checking it, or just when you're at this point, laying your elastic over or on top or whatever, and just measuring what the distance should be, how much that should be, like in the rounds. And you're just gonna make a pin, and I'm gonna sew that with a straight stitch. I'm gonna do a straight stitch, back stitch, beginning end, and then I'll cut this. Boom. So quarter of an inch, or not a quarter of an inch, straight stitch, back stitch, beginning the ends. Then once you do that, you're gonna lay this on top, and you're gonna overlap it about a quarter of an inch, and then you're gonna do a zigzag stitch. That zigzag stitch should be really close to the edge. You don't want it to be like in, not the center, but inside the elastic, because then you're gonna have like a little lip that's not really nice. And then you'll be finished. hope you enjoyed this sew along. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to email hello@madeline.com or to pop them in the comment box below.